Hello, my dears. Daniela here, and welcome to another episode of the Spa Marketing Made Easy podcast. Now, I love talking about marketing and strategy and all the tactical stuff that's going to move your business forward. But today we're actually going to get much more personal, which always makes me a little bit nervous if I'm telling the truth. But if you're a longtime listener, you know that back in 2019, I had a miscarriage. It totally rocked my world. I felt like I had just lost myself, and my natural instinct or my coping mechanism was to just throw myself into work. But the problem was that the slightest thing would trigger me and I would just bust out into tears. So I was not being an effective leader. I was not being productive. It was just a mess is the only way that I can describe it. And apart from losing my dad when I was 17, it was really the hardest thing that I've ever experienced in life. Now, as I mentioned, in general, I'm a fairly private person, so it always makes me a little bit uncomfortable talking about things like this, especially like the really hard, challenging things that have impacted me on such a deep level. But the thing is, every time that I bring up the fact that I had a miscarriage or went through this pain, the amount of messages that I get from women who have been through something similar is just astounding. And, I remember the first time that I let my Spa Retail Rockstar students know, because I had to cancel a coaching call that was scheduled like 2 days after the miscarriage or something crazy like that. And I got probably 30 or 40 emails of women sharing that they had been through something similar. And that made me feel not alone. And it made me feel so much more normal, and also like there wasn't something wrong with me, because even though your logical mind can be like, hey, this happens to 1 in 4 women, and you can read all of the stats and know that it's just like a normal part of life. It's a normal thing that happens. It's just not talked about very much. And the way that you feel is that there's something wrong with you. Like, oh, did I have a cup of coffee? Did I do, did I, whatever you're going through your mind, or at least I was, and trying to figure out what I did to cause this. And that is not healthy. So for me, if there's even just one person listening who has had a miscarriage, who's struggling with the trauma of it and affecting your work, I want you to know that you're not alone. And it doesn't have to be a miscarriage. We all have traumas, and there's not one trauma that's better or worse than the other. It's trauma is trauma, right? So if you had something challenging going on in your life that's affecting your work, I want you to know that you're not alone. So how I moved past this kind of downward spiral that I was in was really through working with just a wide variety of professionals. I went to counseling, I tried EMDR, I talked to energy workers, I talked to psychics, and I also did a session with my friend and guest on today's show, Mandy. Now, Mandy focuses on imagery work, which for me, I was like, what the heck is that? But I'm going to do it. But it really, really helped. Now, what I'm sharing today is what worked for me. So make sure that you take everything we say with a grain of salt, because we are all very different. What I was going through, I wanted to try everything under the sun to see what was going to make me feel better. But if you're clinically depressed, if you have some level of clinical anxiety, then you really do need to seek the help of a medical professional. But for me, this was a very clear, this trauma caused this emotion. So I wanted to try all aspects, including, professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, and then also the more kind of energy woo-woo stuff to see what was going to help me. All right. So before we get into the episode, let me just read you Mandy's bio real quick so you can get an idea of kind of the work that she does. So Mandy is a transformation and healing expert who's helped hundreds of people all over the world to overcome anxiousness and thrive by combining the power of imagery with their own innate capabilities. She founded Palladium Mind to empower others by sharing the easiest ways to transcend disease, to enjoy everything more. So she's a good friend. We're in the same mastermind. I'm so happy that she and I crossed paths. So let's now, without further ado, go ahead and play that interview. All right, Mandy, welcome to the Spa Marketing Made Easy podcast. I'm excited and kind of nervous to have you on the show. Only nervous because I know that this is going to be kind of a personal episode for me. But I think that it's something that's really, really important to share.
I love that. Thank you for having me, Daniela. And I feel like it's a compliment that this episode will make you a little bit nervous. It's really, really my honor to be here. And you know that I adore you. So thank you.
Thank you. So if you guys are wondering, like, what the heck is Daniela nervous about, since I feel like I talk about everything on this podcast. So last year, you guys, I'm sure, remember that I went through a really, really challenging, one of the most challenging times in my life when I had a miscarriage. I lost a baby. My husband and I had been trying to get pregnant. We were super excited. And I went through, we had all the joy and all the just like anticipation and all of that. And then I lost the baby. And that put me in such a funk because it was not only losing the baby, but it had brought back a lot of trauma from losing my dad and just kind of put me in this downward spiral. And what I want to share with you guys today and how I'm going to relate this to business is that funk that I was in was not only affecting my personal life, but also my professional life, right? Because when we don't feel good emotionally and we're going through some sort of struggle or trauma, it doesn't have to be losing a baby. It doesn't have to be some kind of super crazy thing. Trauma comes in all shapes and sizes, right? And stress and anxiety and all of these kind of things. But when we go through something that deep where we can't just leave it at the door, it's going to come back up. We have to be able to understand and know how to process those emotions and those feelings and that anxiety so that we can be the best version of ourselves, because it will affect your business and it will affect your personal life if you just kind of bury it deep. So I went like all in. I was like, you know what? I have worked way too hard on myself for such a long period of time that I am not going to let this bring me backwards. And Mandy we're in the same mastermind. And where it really all came out is it was our first mastermind retreat. I was going there like I had my big girl pants on. I was like business ready. I was ready to like take over the world and talk about profitability and metrics and all this cool business stuff. And the whole retreat, I was crying. I was just like crying because I couldn't process anything because I was so stuck on losing this baby and that trauma. And Mandy, you reached out to me, and I shared a little bit in the intro about what you do, but you really do work in imagery and helping people use through imagery to process emotions, to, help people get over habits or blocks or things that are holding them back. And that's not something that immediately resonates with me, but I was like, heck, I'm going to do anything. I'm going to do, what was it? What's that other one called? Not EMR.
EMDR.
EMDR. Yeah. EMDR, regular psychology, like imagery work, like I talked to a psychic. I was like, that is like so beyond anything that I have ever done. But I was like, look, I need to process this. And it was really after the work that we did together that it was probably, I would say like 2 weeks later, things just shifted. And I was able to really get into a space where I started feeling like my old self again and started feeling, I don't know what the heck you did, but it worked. So thank you for that.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure, my honor.
So I wanted to just bring you on now to share that because I feel like it's been a long enough time for me to fully process everything and come into a good space. But I wanted to just start that conversation about imagery work, about how if an esthetician, a spa owner, someone listening today is going through a trauma in their personal life, how can they release that? How can they, because it does affect their business, which then creates this downward spiral, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are such great questions. And I think you're so brave, Daniela, for using your platform to talk about every facet of business ownership and leadership, not just the things that are like more pleasant or comfortable or safe. So thank you so much for exposing this extremely personal and important experience that you had so that we can talk about it and hopefully I can be of service to those listening. I think that anxiety and stress as a result of trauma, or even like I see like as down feelings, another response to trauma. What I observe is sometimes people go into more of the down feeling spectrum, and some people tend more towards an anxiousness, and oftentimes those can come together. This is, if I were to simplify it, just to lay a little bit of groundwork in, if I were to simplify it, I see this as a product of our distance that's grown from our consciousness as we grow a critical faculty when we're very young at the age of 7, that critical age of reason, and the subconscious or feeling mind. So when you're a kid, let's bring it back to the kids. Let's bring it back to something that's common to a lot of us. A child doesn't question why they're angry. A child doesn't question why they're crying. They know exactly why they're crying. And sometimes they don't. Maybe they don't recognize that they're tired, right? But there's a feeling, it's getting expressed more often than not.
Yes, I have an almost 3-year-old. I'm very aware of her emotions.
She lets you know, right?
Yes.
It's amazing. So, well, let's just say that at some point in the development of a small person, you know, you're out in public or you're at church or you're at a grocery store and it's like, hey, tone it down. Like, you're embarrassing us right now. You know, like a full out temper tantrum on the ground. Well, the older that a child gets, the less really acceptable it is in society for like, I can't go and pitch a fit on QFC floor out here in Seattle. You know, that doesn't really, it's not an appropriate way of processing my emotions. But we all learn that, okay, certain times, certain emotions, we decide at some point in our development that they're okay to express, and others maybe not so much. This can create a feeling of shame from a very young age. And we're like, okay, I'm feeling that way, but I shouldn't express it. I'm just bringing all of this up because I really want to normalize the distance that we create through developing in modern civilization is something that's really common to all of us. The fact that we're not always totally aware of why as adults we're feeling the way we are, but the feelings are happening all the same. I want to share today that this is really good news. That breakdown of coping ability is a signal that you're ready to find out and release the unconscious cause, because emotions are just fleeting through the body. Once their purpose or intention is expressed and understood and responded to, they will be gone. That's kind of like what you experienced through not just our work together, but the resourcefulness that you had to go and seek every resource that you could and bring that to bear for your problem. I mean, it's bound to break at some point. The issue will break at some point. And that's what you discovered as well. Feelings, I think the last little bit of groundwork is the problem is feelings are expressing themselves through the body, and we're often using critical mind to try to solve them. That doesn't work so well.
Yeah. And it's interesting because my daughter, just last night or 2 nights ago, so we try and do like positive parenting with everything. And we don't we don't raise our voices unless there's like a danger or anything like that. And she's very sensitive to my husband, and she's a daddy's girl, totally.
Beautiful.
And we have those little plugs, the like plug covers, the plastic things that you put in the plugs. And our cleaning people had left one of the plugs out, and Taya was over there like close to the plug, and Kyle goes, "Taya," he like had raised his voice just to like, don't get near the plug. She lost it. She started crying, and then she was saying, "Owie, owie, owie." And it was so interesting to me because it was like that emotion had hurt her. It was like a physical pain for her. And I think that as adults, I think when we try and process it in our mind, we don't understand that there is that that emotions can cause pain. We're just trying to understand, like, I don't feel right. I don't feel whatever, there's like,
right.
We're like, yeah, emotions can make us feel good, but we're not necessarily like making that connection between how impactful negative emotions or anxiety can actually be.
Right. And, yeah, that's just a beautiful example. I feel like I had 5 thoughts at once, all floating through 5 responses. Yeah, that's such a beautiful example.
So how do you gave us kind of the groundwork, but like if someone is struggling with any level of trauma, like first of all, like how do they even acknowledge if they're struggling, right? Because I think that's actually step 1 is like knowing that you are feeling that stress or anxiety and not just snapping. Because I think that we see so many people that are like, either a super negative mindset or whatever, and they're not addressing the real issue. And then it's affecting them in their choices that they're making. It's affecting them. Like one simple example is that, a lot of business owners are really afraid to put themselves out there on social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're afraid to be on Facebook Live or whatever. And that comes with the fear comes from, I don't want to be judged. Who am I to think that I can do this? Who am all those kind of thoughts? But doesn't that come from an anxiety or nervousness or like level of or lack of self-confidence or belief in oneself?
Totally. I mean, and it's definitely going to differ for each person. It's so funny that you bring this up right now because Tarzan K actually posted on Instagram yesterday, "You're not a bad person if you don't want to do Facebook Lives." And it's about this like type of coping, where the meanings that we assign to something are everything. So let's pretend that there's a real person here who's having this problem, and let's give them like the aversion isn't, well, this doesn't match what my business needs right now, but it's just like, should we say like absolute frozen state when you go to hit the live button, or that feeling of, I don't know what to say, or, like these thoughts that run through the mind. Anything that happens automatically, we can be sure has been set in motion to try to protect us from something and keep us safe and keep us surviving. That's the only reason the body or mind, we say mind because there's a healing intelligence that runs our entire body. We don't have to tell ourselves when to breathe. We don't have to tell our synapses when to uptake different components of information, etc. So what what happens is being governed already by a healing intelligence. The mind is often what I attribute to the thoughts that run, because the brain is just an organ. It's an organ of survival as well. And it's an organ, a directing organ. But the mind is how we use our awareness and direct our attention and what we're thinking about. And thoughts, as probably listeners can relate, like you can relate, thoughts happen automatically sometimes. And when those happen automatically, they're part of our inner dialogue.
I've heard that we have something crazy like 60,000 thoughts a day, but like 99% of them are subconscious. Like we just don't even realize that we're having them. And those are our stories that are so deep that who am I to be doing this? Or I could never make this amount of money, or I could never, like those specific blocks or limiting beliefs are all so deep in our subconscious. We're just not even aware of them.
I love where we're going with this, because I think I want to circle back in a little bit, and I want to answer that question of like, what can listeners do? This aspect of our conversation is so relevant to unloading the experience of blame of self, which keeps us locked in these downstate emotions. Like when we're going, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Mm-hmm. That's one way we're distracting ourselves from exploring with curiosity. What is the cause of this right now for me? Because it's not happening external to us. The environment could be, everybody in a room may be experiencing the same environment at a live event, like the beautiful live events that you show, but someone may be having a really negative response to an interaction or being triggered based on old wounding, and others may be enjoying it completely. It's never about it's seldom about the situation, and it's how we relate to it. And that I feel aware that could be overwhelming, and that could be like, well, what the heck? Like, what am I supposed to do about that? But the recognition that how you're relating to it has everything to do with the experience that you've had up to now. And there is a reason for these emotions that you're experiencing, especially if they're negative, just like there's reasons for the positive ones that we experience. Mm-hmm. So giving ourselves that dignity and grace to say, okay, this emotion has a positive intention. It's trying to help me to do something. It's bringing my awareness to a problem. That's a gift. Just like if Taya is pulling on your sleeve and says, mommy, 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 like, and you're on the phone, it's like, what does this child want? It's like, well, she has a message for you.
She wants food.
What kind of food usually?
Oh, right now she's really on this like cashew yogurt. So that's like her. Ooh. Or the apple cinnamon rice crisps, those like rice cakes or whatever. The apple cinnamon ones. Those are her two favorite things.
I feel like I want to be in Taya's world right now with the cashew butter. Cashew butter and apple crisps go so well together. So I think one of the main things that I teach people day one-on-one, it's just like, how much information can you impart to help somebody start to command their situation again from a place of parenting the self and not blaming the self. The fact is, the emotion is happening. Mm-hmm. And no amount of analyzing it, even if we understand and get to know the cause, I think about this all the time. Even there's examples in my life. Maybe I could give an example where even once I knew the cause of an emotion that I was experiencing that was affecting my business too, just knowing the cause doesn't change the feeling. Feelings are happening on an automated loop within the body. They're a reaction to stimulus response.
So let me ask you this then, like, how does imagery solve that?
Oh my gosh, this is like a perfect layup. Thank you, Daniela. Imagery is amazing because, oh my God, I love the work I do, because imagery is an interface between conscious and unconscious. So Imagery is the language of our subconscious, just like hormones and emotions are. So I don't deal in hormones. I don't inject people with the body will add hormones on its own if you use the lever of hormones, which can be emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to solve a problem in the subconscious, you have to speak the language of the subconscious. And how do we know the problem is subconscious? I'm going to say that again, but how do we know the problem is subconscious? Because we can't control it by solving it, because no amount of analyzing ourselves has produced a solution. That's how we know it's subconscious. And if it's happening automatically, it's in your subconscious. You can go, thank you. Like that's what I would do right away, is just go, if somebody's listening going, oh my God, I'm having anxiety. This relates to me. Mandy, this relates to me. Okay. Then step one is, okay, thank you, my subconscious. Now I know there's a problem. I just need to find out what it is. And so let's relieve ourselves from trying to do that by analyzing, because it makes us feel like, oh my God, I'm smart. Why would I go ask somebody else? How the heck? This is how I felt locked in the past. How the heck is somebody else going to give me an answer when I'm so smart and I've analyzed this 15,000 different ways across years? Right? How is somebody else going to have it? I think it's really hard for super smart people to think that the answer's out there. The amazing thing is the answer isn't out there. When I work with people, it ain't in me. I don't have the answer. I facilitate the discussion within the body of the individual so they can find out what their consciousness is trying to tell them. And what I mean by that is the body's producing a physiological response plus an emotional effect. The cause, the initiator of that negative feeling is within that person's body. So for those who are listening on audio, I continue to point to my own body, like down in the gut. I'm constantly pointing there because the body is producing this emotion for us. And so if we can't solve it by analyzing, how do we? We're using the natural language of the subconscious. So we simply relax the critical mind and speak to the problem in imagery.
So I want to, for those who are like, what the heck are you guys talking about? I want to just explain a little bit about what our session was like so that people can have a clear idea of like how to use imagery or whatever. So we did our session over Zoom because we live in two different places. But I was laying on my bed. I had the computer set up. You had kind of asked me a few questions, wanted me to get comfortable, kind of, I don't remember what you did to calm my mind or something. There was a few different questions, and you had me do like some breathing work, I think too.
I helped you calm your own mind. Yes. So I said, do we consent? So it's always like the person relaxes their own mind. So I don't have any mind control capability. That's the good news. So I just basically said, would you like to relax? And then you were like, oh yeah. And so then I was like, okay, good. Well, I'm just going to speak some words that are intended to help you do that more easily than you would by doing it yourself. I say there's nothing more decadent than having somebody else help you relax yourself. That's kind of my joke.
So we did the relaxation part, and then you started asking a series of questions and kind of almost like taking me, to me, it felt like a guided meditation in a way, like asking these different questions and imagine you're in this space and what do you see and that kind of stuff. And like what came out of my mind was really weird. I was like, okay. I'm like, I have no idea what this has to do with
why? Why do you say it's weird?
Well, because for me, I was like, I don't know how this relates to what I'm feeling. Like, I think the logical part of my brain was like, what I'm seeing in my responses and whatever, how does that help with the fact that I lost a baby? Right. Like I couldn't connect the two dots. But I was like, whatever, I'm going 100% for this, like if I'm going to do it, I'm doing it all in. Right. So I was like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. And I really was like 100%. And I think that that's an important piece, like whatever type of therapy that you're doing, you have to really trust the process and you have to really believe that it'll work. I think that is super important, and really saying like, I'm 100%, I'm committed to this, I'm open to this.
May I jump in there?
Yeah.
I think that is such a nail on the head type of observation that you just made. And that also relates to who you're working with. It's about, do I feel this is the healing relationship for me?
Mm-hmm.
And another way of understanding why this is so important is because it's the individual's awareness that's creating the shift within their own body by resolving parts that were previously not talking or in disagreement. And you can do that in the subconscious just only by working with a language of the subconscious. And so if all parts of your awareness are not online to have that conversation, but part of your awareness is like, well, is she running her agenda or mine? Or I'm not really sure that she knows what she's doing. Or why are we going this direction versus, or I don't really trust her. Or, you know what I mean? Like those are pretty, I know that those are pretty strongly worded, but they're just examples of if you're in someone's care and you're truly trusting yourself to their assistance, if part of your own awareness is distracted by those types of questions, then you're not fully online to have the conversation with yourself. So part of the logic. Yeah, I think I love your observation.
Yeah. And I think that was one thing that I did really well, was just like, hey, I'm going to trust Mandy 100%. I'm going to just go with whatever she's telling me right now, even though it doesn't really make sense to like what I'm seeing or what I'm, like, but it was like, all right, let's do this. Let's go all in. And it really was just a couple of weeks later that, and I know you've had clients that it's like right away. For me, it was about 2 weeks, because I think I had to like process everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I just woke up one day and was like, like, I don't feel like crap. I don't feel like, cause I was at a place where I would be going, and then I would bust into tears. It was like this, I would be like on this mission and be working. And then all of a sudden something would trigger me and I would just be weeping. And
I'm a sympathetic crier. And I mean, even just hearing your story again, because I got to like be part of walk that journey with you as your friend. And, in the small way that I served you through the skills that I have, I feel like that was almost a more minor role to me. But yeah, I think that's one, it is reflective of what happened to you. And I just appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's circle back and just answer that question as kind of a final thought of, for these estheticians that are struggling, or spa owners, whomever, anyone that's listening, because I've recently found out that we have husbands and kids and all kinds of people listening to the podcast as well, which is awesome. Shout out to you guys. But if anyone is struggling with anxiety or something along those lines, and it's affecting their personal and professional life, like, how can they get help? Like, what can they do? What is the next step?
Okay. I want to tell you something else. This is 2-part, and I'm going to speak it out loud so that we can definitely get there. The first thing is what I see happening that's not helpful. And the second is something that I'd like to share that I think can be really helpful. And I'm truly endeavoring to share the best of what I know right now, like that can be shared in like a 1-step, because there's so much more that you can do to powerfully have that conversation and just resolve stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But not everybody's at that place. Maybe it's a resource issue, et cetera. So let's start with what can be done right this minute. One of the things that I see out there in the world, because of the lens that I have and the knowledge that I am trying to share with others that they can have that help, is I see that there's a lot of guidance out in the world right now about basically observe, acknowledge, release the negative emotion. And for sure, not like connecting to it and digging in like a dog on a bone and just holding it, and stressing over the negative emotion. For sure, that's a more helpful progression. However, if that's where we stop the story, it's like your partner coming to you and saying, "Hey, I'd really like for you to turn the TV down." And you go, "I acknowledge that." And then they walk away and you don't turn the TV down. And then your partner comes back here, "But I'd really like you to turn the TV down. Could you do that?" And you go, "I acknowledge that as well. Thank you." And then they go, I mean, how long do you think that's going to last? Like, that doesn't work very well, right? And so, um, what's the rest of the story is just bringing awareness to the fact that you can have that conversation and then respond once you know from the feeling mind what the source of that problem is. And listening in another way is what's required. So the first thing that I would suggest is giving yourself that acceptance and love to stop trying to solve something like anxiety or making yourself wrong because of it. And also understand that this is an almost universal experience. Anxiety is a feedback loop within the body to alert you of a dissonance, either within yourself or between the self and the environment of what's happening. So anxiety is a natural response if one of our beliefs conflicts with another within. It's a tension that is resulting. And another thing is, if something that we're doing is not in alignment with our values, anxiety will result. Something that other person is doing that is not resonating with our values around us and we're not stopping it, anxiety can result. So this is a very natural occurrence. There's also diagnosable and like clinical anxiety. So I just want to draw a distinction. Anxious feelings are where I work. I support medical practitioners. I am not like licensed. This is not a licensed profession that I do. So I want to ask, first of all, is that helpful, Daniela? Do you think that that's helpful? Okay, great. And then there's a second thing. It's like, what can you do to start having that conversation? This is having that conversation within yourself. Certainly there's someone like me, I'd be honored to assist that conversation because it's what I exist to do in my work and I am on fire about it. But how you can start at home right now is by listening in another way. So in meditation, often people ask me, is this like meditation? It's the same quality of mind. It's the same state of mind. It's the same brain wavelengths that we're running. It's just a different application of that state. So in meditation, we tend to try to empty the mind or fixate on one mantra. And through imagery work, we invite, through stilling the critical mind and stilling the mind chatter, then we invite information to emerge. And for different people, that can show up and will show up totally different ways. One way could be through a feeling in the body. When we rest analysis, we could experience an emotion. That's a beautiful piece of information. Then we could become curious about that in acceptance instead of immediately deciding that there's something wrong with it.
Very good.
I'm glad that that's helped. Other people get imagery through visualizations. They might see a picture or have a memory. And these are all really valid ways. This is the result of doing this repeatedly just within yourself, just for yourself, is that you will over time bring your own consciousness, your own conscious part and your unconscious part closer and closer back together, just like in that child state. Just like when you used to feel comfortable throwing temper tantrums on the ground, except for now you have the adult awareness not to do that and the control not to do that.
Yes. Don't throw temper tantrums at your spa. Oh, very good. Well, thank you so much, Mandy. And I really hope that this helps, even if it's just one person out there listening that needed to hear this today. It's not comfortable for me to share this kind of stuff, but I think that it's very important because it really so much of the work that we do as entrepreneurs and as business owners is internal work. We have to work on ourselves to become the best leaders, to become, to have the strength to continually step out of our comfort zone over and over and over and over again to create this vision of what we want to create. So I think it still is a very important conversation to have. So Mandy, where can our listeners find you and follow you if they want to keep in touch?
Oh, I'd love that. So I have a little bit of an Instagram addiction. So it's my happy place in a good way. And so I love to connect on Instagram. And if you tag Daniela in a comment or something and just write Daniela's IG, then I'll know that we connected here, and I love to follow people back. So that's one way. And then there's also a gift that I created through my business site. It's super easy. My business is called Palladium Mind. So for those scientists out there, you'll recognize that palladium is one of the elements in the platinum group on the periodic table. And it's PALLADIUM mind.com/spa marketing made easy, no hyphens. Spa marketing made easy is going to bring you to a page with gifts, especially for your people.
Very good. Well, thank you so much. And we'll get all of those links included below this episode. As always, for each of you listening, if you want to keep this conversation going, please be sure to head over to the Spa Marketing Made Easy Facebook group, tag me in the post, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, catch you on the next episode.